Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the US Futures Weekly Chart Analysis for the week ending 8th of May 2026. The first chart is the US dollar index futures. They continue to trade sideways in a range. Price traded inside the previous bar's range for most of the week on about average volume. The market's going sideways here. There's no intent being shown. It appears the market may move higher next week, but only probably within the range I expect. There's no obvious signs the market is going to attempt to break out or break down. E-mini S&P, this is S&P 500 index futures, and they tested for supply early in the week below the previous bar's close and found that supply was fairly modest and in response pushed higher and closed above the previous bar's high, which is quite positive really. Volume increased to about the average, so it was genuine trading. This reduces the chance price will come back and test the breakout line for strength now. It's had the opportunity to do so. It's more likely to attempt to continue higher now. This is US Treasury 10-year note futures. They continue to trade sideways within a range as well. They're showing very little intent at the moment. The volumes are quite low, well below the average. Highs of the range, this breakdown line above, and the lows of the range down here, with price trading pretty much right in the middle of that range for most of the time now. Supply being drawn out at the highs and some demand emerging at the lows. Copper price futures. Copper price futures came back, tested the lows of the range earlier in the week, down here, and then accelerated higher to close above the highs of the range. This is not yet a breakout, but the market's threatening to break out. It's the highest close we've seen for some time. And prices closed above the previous up bar's high, which is quite a positive reaction. We'll see if the market's got enough strength to really accelerate higher now. You'll note that volume, while increased, remained below the average. So that will reflect to some extent the trading below the previous bar's close as the market was testing for supply, and it really only accelerated higher later in the week. But it also reflects a lack of selling pressure in the market, and the market's effectively floated higher on a lack of supply. If we can really get some demand now, this market will accelerate higher. Gold price futures. Gold price futures continue to trade sideways. There was some trading below the previous bar's close, testing for supply in here, before just floating higher on relatively low volume to close adjacent to the previous bar's high. So this was really consolidation to a large extent. The market's come back, tested for supply, found that selling pressure was low, and then floated high within the range of the previous bar to close adjacent to its high. It's well placed now to make an attempt to push higher. It really does need to find some demand to do so, at least do so sustainably. Silver price futures. Silver price futures were a little stronger than gold this week and have been for some time now. Not considerably stronger, just marginally stronger, but stronger all the same. Here's the previous up bar's high up here. And you can see the market's really, to a large degree, been trading within that bar's range. At the time, we said the market was threatening to break out. Instead, it's come back. It's consolidated within that bar's range. And this week, price has moved higher after testing for supply earlier in the week. Volumes remain very low. So all of that volatility that we've seen previously and the big build-up to the push higher has eased to a considerable degree now, and trading has gone back to more normal levels, which is a good response. It was getting a bit frothy there for a while. and now the market spent some time consolidating sideways, gathering itself up, and it does actually look more positive than negative. It needs to find some demand, similar to gold, before it's really going to accelerate higher again. Light crude price futures, and they continue to respect the June 22 high level I have marked. Price continues to trade around that level with a clustering of closes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 closes right at or around that line, with supply being drawn out when price moves above and demand being drawn out when price moves below. This is like the equilibrium level, at least at this point in time. Volume was slightly increased but remained below the average. But looking at where it actually closed here, the volume, it was pretty average volume overall, which suggests that it was genuine trading. The market's pretty comfortable at this level, around the 95. I note that this week, when price did trade below the previous bar's low, demand came in and the market closed adjacent to that bar's low. So there is still some reasonable demand in this market. And apart from that, the market's really just trading in consolidation mode sideways at this level. Into the currencies now. This is the Euro-US dollar currency pair. And this market's also trading sideways in a range, in there like that, between these two logical levels. Volume was slightly reduced and slightly below the average. It wasn't particularly low, but it was slightly below the average. So you can really say that this was lackluster trading sideways within a range. Have a look at the pound. Pound has been a little bit stronger more recently, and it continues to be so. The euro's back at this level. The pound traded inside the range of the previous bar, testing for supply below its close briefly before pushing higher and closing up near the previous bar's high, but still within its range on slightly below the average volume. It was reduced and slightly below the average, but it wasn't low volume. So the market really it's grinding here, perhaps grinding higher to some degree, but it's not really moving higher with any intent. It's floating higher. This is the Japanese yen currency futures, and they did attempt to move higher. There was some trading below the previous bar's close. It did attempt to move higher and above the breakdown line, but it drew out some supply. Volume was reduced but remained above the average, so there was some supply emerge in this market when price attempted to push higher. I think you'll see the market pull back and consolidate at least early in the week, and there may be a secondary attempt to push higher if supply is found to be low. Aussie dollar currency futures, and they traded very slightly higher. There was a period of consolidation during the week where the market traded below the previous bar's close, testing the market for supply, and supply wasn't found to be strong, and in response, prices just floated up. Volume was slightly increased. It remained below the average overall, but that was likely when the market pulled back to a large degree and found that the selling pressure was low. This market continues to look stronger than weaker. It has done for some time, apart from this pullback here where support was quickly found. The market looks like it's grinding higher here. It'll probably push up towards this level at some point, at least over time. Bitcoin futures. Bitcoin futures did push higher this week, and it made a half-hearted or lackluster challenge to break out. Here was the highs of the range. We were expecting some resistance from where market gapped down here in the background, and obviously there'll be some supply drawn out if the market does trade up this high. There was no great challenge to the highs of the range. The market floated higher on increased volume, but below average volume. And there was no real oomph behind the trading. There was no great intent being shown. It was perhaps a little over-enthusiasm that the market's been showing more recently. Price floated up, did encounter some supply, and closed in the lower half of the bar, but just above the highs of the range. So it wasn't overwhelming supply that was drawn out, but there was some supply that was drawn out. A stronger attempt to break out would probably overcome the supply at this level. And how much supply remains above that level is the question. So I expect the market will probably attempt to continue trading in here up towards this breakdown line in the background. And that's where I expect we'll see some increased supply. It does appear that the supply is relatively modest at this level where the gap lower occurred. Back to the US dollar index futures, pretty clear that the market's trading sideways within a range. There's no great intent being shown at the moment. There was the opportunity to move lower this week, which was rejected, and price closed just above the previous bar's low, which suggests the market may attempt to move higher next week, but I expect it'll be higher within the range. Volume was about average, so it was genuine trading, and the modest support that emerged suggests that there'll be at least an attempt to push higher or float higher early in the week next week. Okay, thanks for your time. Back again next week. See ya.